Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for logging in today for our 2:30 p.m. workshop. It is my pleasure to be with you. My name is Michael Robertson. I teach anthropology, and I'm also serving as your online education faculty coordinator, which is a long, drawn-out title to say I get to serve faculty just like you all as we navigate the world of online teaching together. So it's my privilege to be with you today. I'm grateful for your attendance. I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items before we jump into our featured presenter for the afternoon. As you may have heard, this meeting is being recorded. It will be posted on YouTube later for sharing amongst colleagues who could not be here, so just be aware of that. I would like to ask, make sure that you remain muted unless, of course, you have a question or something you'd like to chime in. Then by all means, feel free to use your Zoom hand or physical hand on camera, and we can unmute that way as well. Please feel free to utilize the chat function during the meeting. We can make questions there or comments there, or share anything relevant to what is being presented along the way. And we will have dedicated time after the presentation for Q&A. So feel free to drop your questions into the chat throughout the session, and we can make sure to prioritize those questions as they come up. Last thing, we do have the automatic closed captions enabled for this meeting. If you'd like to turn those on, just click that CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and those automatic captions will appear for you there. Okay, so let me give you a little bit of context or background as to the why behind this showcase series. I'll begin very simply. I love online teaching. I really do. And as online education faculty coordinator, I get to serve faculty all around the college and help them troubleshoot their online courses. But one of my favorite parts of this job isn't necessarily solving the issues, but it is when faculty come to me with their successes when teaching online. It's so encouraging to hear faculty share what they've done in Canvas that excites them, what they're doing online that engages their students, or what pushes them to try new things. So this workshop series is just that, a showcase of some of our top online instructors sharing what they do best. So I hope what you see today inspires you to try something new in your online course that you haven't done before. I know it will certainly inspire me. All right, so that's the context. That's where this is coming from. And so today, it is my great privilege to introduce one of our colleagues, Professor Tricia Wilging. And Tricia is a product of the community college system, starting at Riverside Community College. And there she developed a passion for literature, teaching, and the community college environment as a whole. Then she moved on to UC Riverside, where she continued to enjoy reading and exploring, lots of text and earning her BA in English, and then continued to go to the master's level at Cal State University Fullerton, getting a master's of science degree in reading education so that she could teach at community colleges. Presently, Tricia is also in her third year pursuing a master's degree in trauma studies at University of College Cork in Ireland, a program which I get to call her a classmate, which is really fun, with the intent of teaching trauma studies here at LBCC. Now, currently at LBCC, she teaches in the Reading and Teacher Preparation Department, is also in her fifth consecutive year serving as Student Learning Outcomes Coordinator, a role that has her involved in more capacities than I can keep track of at all levels of the college. So in 2023, she submitted and aligned her Read 82 online course through Peer Online Course Review, which I had the personal privilege to review. And I look forward to having her share it with you today. So without further ado, let's give a Zoom clap or physical clap welcoming Tricia. Thank you very much for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Michael, for your very warm welcome and introduction. I didn't even think about all of those things. I haven't thought about all of those things for quite a while. So it's fun to be here and to get to share with you a little bit about reading. I think I know most of you from in my capacity as the SLO coordinator. So it's a little bit fun to get to share a little bit about reading education, which is my first passion and what brought me to LBCC. So just for everyone here, my intention is to go through a few slides. I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I approached my course design, and I will make those slides available after I'm done sharing. And then at the end of the slideshow, I'd like to jump into Canvas and just show you a little bit about what all of that intention and design turned into as far as my course is concerned. And so I'd like to show you different things, the homepage, the course orientation, how I've set up my modules, some of the assignments that I've developed and the reasons I've developed them in the way that I have. And so that's sort of going to be my approach. And if there are specific things as we go through, feel free to drop something in the chat. If I can take it in the middle, I will. But again, kind of like Michael shared, I think we'll have plenty of time for Q, and I guess I like to call it Q&R, Michael, rather than Q&A, because I don't know if I have any answers, but I might be able to give a response. So we'll leave a little bit of time for that at the end, and I'll hopefully be able to share with you a little bit about what I've done and why I do it, and we can go from there. So kind of without further ado, again, I'll jump into my slides. And Michael, will you just let me know if we have any trouble at all with the slides or the audio or any of that?
Will
And
do.
if there is a question in the chat that I should take, please feel free to jump in and interrupt me.
Got you covered.
Okay, so here we go. When I started the course, obviously, you know, we start a lot with our content. We're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about developing content in a way that will translate to our students. And reading is it's a content course, but it's also a skills-based course. So I'm trying to help my students to develop a particular skill set while learning course content. And the way that I do that is I try to select certain disciplines that we get into each semester. And so, for example, this semester we're studying food and nutrition, we're studying anatomy, and we're studying public health. And so as you look through the course, you will see some of that content, but you'll also see some of the skills behind it. But as far as the online piece is concerned, I had some intention in how I wanted to deliver the course and how I wanted to present myself and to present that content. So initially, I was really I guess I emphasized these kind of 5 items, and I'll go through them one by one. But I wanted to reduce my students' cognitive load. I wanted to express warmth so that they saw me as an ally and somebody who was there to support them. I wanted my expectations to be clear. I think that goes along with reducing cognitive load, but I just really wanted them to know what was expected of them. I wanted to provide differentiated learning options because we all know students learn differently. And I also wanted the course to be visually pleasing because if I have to spend all my time in there, I want to like to look at it. And then eventually I went through the peer online course review process. And I would say my course really got upgraded because I became even more intentional with weaving these 5 things into my content in very specific ways. So I'm going to show you about kind of the initial things that I did, and then I'm going to show you how that developed with the peer online course review process, which we affectionately like to call POCR. So in reducing cognitive load, I really tried to do a few things. I wanted to have a clear homepage for my students with an indication of where they should start. I wanted to develop a thorough orientation module so that they knew what was expected of them. I wanted my modules to be consistent and clearly sequenced so that each week students would know I got to do this and this and this, and that's what is expected of me. I wanted to break my content into units of study so that we would be developing skills but applied to a specific discipline. And especially in a reading course, because I want the students who take my course and learn to navigate the rigor of college level texts to then be able to go out into the rest of their academic journey and really feel equipped and confident in their abilities to apply what they've learned in my class to any kind of discipline that they would go into. And then I wanted to ensure that guidance and instructions were spread throughout the course in different modalities. I wanted text-based instructions, I wanted video-based orientations. And so those were some of the things that I tried to do in the beginning to reduce cognitive load. I wanted to express warmth, right? I created a welcome video. I send out a welcome announcement. And a lot of the times I send that in an email about a week before the class begins, letting students know that the Canvas course has been published and they can jump in. But for a student who adds after that date or even after the course has begun, how do they get access to that information? So I wanted that welcome announcement to be part of that kind of course orientation so that they would have access to that same information and wouldn't feel like they were kind of beginning from a point of being behind or not having all the information that they needed. I had them have them do a discussion board activity all the time where where they're introducing themselves to the class and to me. And I feel like it's very important to take the time to respond to each one personally and welcome them. So I try to respond to something that they've shared, let them know that I'm glad they're here, encourage them to keep working toward their goals in the course. And so really working on that personal connection. And then each week I have what I call my introduction and goals page, and I'll show you that. But it could be a page that's very dry and just says, here's what we're going to learn this week, and here's how you do it. And they need that guidance, but how can I make a personal connection? And so I've sort of developed, and probably you can see this on my slides already, I have a theme of growth in my courses. So the goal is to grow. And so throughout the semester, or at the beginning, obviously, I tell them and share a picture in that orientation or in the introduction and goals page about, kind of our root system. And sometimes it takes a little while for growth to be visible. So not to be discouraged if the growth doesn't seem so evident so quickly, because our roots grow downward before the blossom comes upward, right? But then how do I convey that, and how do I make a personal connection to them? Well, during the pandemic, I spent a year in Ohio, and near my family's home was a cornfield. And while I didn't have any intention of sharing those photographs, kind of week by week, as I took my walks, I charted the growth of this field. And so week by week in my course, I put a picture of the cornfield, the pictures that I took, with the encouragement to where they are, and hopefully make that just a little bit of personal connection, but also encourage them to continue on their path toward growth. I try to give them a lot of what I call warm demander feedback through the course, where I'm holding them to high expectations, but I'm cheering for them along the way. And I have a little graphic I can share with you after my presentation as well about being a warm demander, if that sounds interesting to you. And then I try to do some just-in-time supports and themed office hours. So, as I'm grading assignments, if students are really struggling with a concept, say outlining, for example, sometimes I'll offer a themed office hour twice in a week, one morning and one evening, even though it's an online class. Whether they want to attend or don't, that's up to them, but try to have a themed office hour that would address some of their needs in a kind of a just-in-time way. I try to convey clear expectations, so I set a unit self-grading sheet so they know what's coming in the unit, what the point value is for all of those things, and they can sort of keep track of where they are as they go. I set clear outcomes and objectives for each unit and each week, and that might be a little bit of the SLO coordinator in me. But also I just feel like it's important for students to know what the goals are so that they know how that they can go about meeting them. I already talked a little bit about the module structure. I've tried to put icons in the course for little visual cues. This is a discussion, this is a submission, this is a quiz. So we'll look at those as well, but just some little learning cues for our different types of learners that also help to convey those expectations. And then in any reading assignment, I try to give them instructions for while they're reading, what do I want them to be getting out of this assignment? And then so that when they go ahead and need to submit a homework assignment, they know what they have needed to be doing throughout the process. Differentiated learning opportunities. At the end of each module, I have supplemental readings, resources, and practice opportunities. So it's not a required part of the course, but it's something that a student who feels like, oh, I didn't get it yet, or I need some more practice with this, just some supplemental resources that they can go to for additional support and help. In my course, we're studying different disciplines, and I feel like it's important for students who are learning in a discipline to learn the language of that discipline. So we always have a set of key terms that I hope that they will begin to recognize more terminology in that discipline, but also utilize. And so I set up some little gamified opportunities for them to learn their key terms and practice those things outside of the main structure of the course. And then I try to give them some choices. We have different assignments with choices. They can submit an essay or design a brochure to show their learning at the end of a unit. They can read this article or they can read this article. Or sometimes if we're introducing a unit and there are a few videos that I've selected, they can choose two among the four that seem most interesting to them and write their response about that. So trying to weave differentiated learning and student choice into the course whenever I can. And then in a simple way, I just want it to be visually pleasing. If I have to spend a lot of time in there and I want it to look pleasant. And so I set up my homepage to be a certain way, and my modules and even the pages. So chunking the assignments and the readings and these kinds of things, just so that there's some consistency and some visual appeal throughout. When it came time to do the peer online course review process, I feel like it really enhanced my pedagogical design. So I got my degree in education, so I feel like I come from a place that is strong in pedagogy, but at the same time, the peer online course review helped me to frame that pedagogical strength in an online environment. So I feel like it was really helpful. It helped me to establish a much more intentional content presentation. The way I designed or conveyed content over time was more intentional. It made me facilitate more meaningful interactions, I thought, both peer-to-peer and faculty to student. It required me to design more transparent evaluations and assessments, and it ensured that my content was accessible to all of my students. And so a couple of things that looked like is for content presentation, I established these text set with themed readings, and they were the foundations of our skills-based application. So everything was in that theme. And then we had an OER textbook that introduced the key skills for suggestions with what to think about while reading, and also embedded video demonstrations. And OER was important to me because I wanted it to be a cheaper option for students, and also to ensure that course materials didn't limit equitable access to learning material. I designed lessons, and I felt like it was important that my voice was there, because it's one thing to read about it in a textbook, it's another thing to hear about it from your own instructor. And so I tried to use different methods to present content. I used something called Play Pause It. I used YouTube videos. I made PDF copies of my slide decks, just different ways that I could convey content that would support student learning, but with my own voice and design and spin on that. I mentioned the key terms, that it wasn't just a list of key terms anymore, it became the game. And then tried to offer very specific course and institutional support. So where can you go for tech support at the college? And where can you go if you have a question about our communication plan or our course policies? So those kinds of things became a lot more intentional. Our interactions, I tried to make sure student hours or student office hours were set at specific times. that introduce yourself activity at the beginning, I felt developed and became more meaningful. I tried to do an inquiry question discussion board, golden lines, Padlets, where students would kind of capture all of the important ideas from a text onto a Padlet. And then when they had to go back and write an essay about it, they would have this repository of golden lines that all of their peers contributed to. Sometimes we would do a jigsaw activity where students with last names A through F had to read one section of the text, and G through M had to read another section, and N through Z had to read another section, and everybody would contribute according to the section that they read, and ideally that would put the entire content together. So lots of ways to facilitate interactions that would hopefully make learning online feel just as significant and interactional as learning in the classroom. Obviously, it would be carried out differently, but it would still be that meaningful. Again, my assignment templates had to become more transparent. Rather than just talking about how I would grade something, I had to establish rubrics, and I did so for all of my assignments. I provided samples of student work because they weren't getting that feedback in the classroom. So how could they see what a good assignment looked like? And then I used some surveys for self-reflection to encourage the student self-reflection, and also to give them opportunities to provide anonymous feedback to me about themselves, about the course, about what I could be doing better to serve them. And POCR also really made me demanded a lot from me as far as accessibility. That was one thing that I really had to work on, and it was such a good exercise for me. So you'll see headings and lists and table structure had to be just right. Color had to be just right. Rather than just a link to something, I had to build a descriptive link and provide alternate text and these kinds of things. And so the Canvas accessibility tools then ended up being just very useful. And so I think kind of my own, so ultimately really my experience was just that my own experience in education and pedagogy, coupled with what POCR demanded as far as developing that or establishing that pedagogical strength in an online forum, I felt like really contributed to my ability to design a course I could be pleased with, and to design a course I felt that my students would navigate successfully and well and learn from, ideally in just as meaningful and an intentional of a way as they would if they were in the classroom. And so that is the end of the slides. Does anybody have any questions for me? I'll take a quick pause before I show you what that looks like in Canvas, or do we have anything coming in the chat, Michael?
No, the only question in the chat was about sharing these wonderful slides. If you'd be so kind, maybe you can send them to me after the presentation later.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, then I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and switch, and I'm going to show you what my course looks like. And so here is my course, and I want to preface this with saying that I haven't taught an online asynchronous POCR Align course since the summer. And so actually this is my summer course shell. And so anyway, when you look at the like weekly modules and the content, there's a lot there, but that's because we had to get through 16 weeks worth of content in 5 weeks. And obviously I didn't just take a 16-week course and triple the work in every unit. That doesn't translate well. My course shifted a little. I only taught 2 units over the summer instead of 3, but still really worked to design and implement all of those things I shared in my slides. It's just in a 5-week format instead of a 16-week format. So this is my homepage. So kind of the very beginning, here's my banner, welcome message. I create a little meet your professor video intro. I think it's 3 minutes or something like that. Try not to be too long, but just give them an opportunity to see my face and get a sense of kind of my disposition or how I am before they have to spend the next few weeks with me. And then right here at the very beginning, the key links for the term and a clear indicator, where do you start? So I have the arrow saying start here at the course orientation, but then all of these other images are buttons that have live links and lead to some other place within the course that they're going to have to navigate to somewhat frequently. And then there's a standing link for office hours. Again, in a summer session, I don't have set office hours, but I will take office hours by appointment. And I tried to give them ideas for if you want to spend some time in office hours and you don't have something specific, or if you do, sorry, excuse me, if you do, these are some great reasons to come visit me in office hours. So let's set an appointment. And then these additional unit resources, a student wouldn't know what these are on the first day of class, but after the course orientation, they would know what these are. And they might be resources that students would return to again and again and again. So I felt that setting them on the home page would be a nice quick shortcut for them to access that content that they would visit frequently. Okay, so I think the next thing we can do is look at the course orientation. So within my course orientation, I just tried to give them the things that they would need. And I end it with a course orientation quiz, which is it's the key that unlocks the rest of the course. Because I just know myself as a learner well enough. Sometimes as a student, I would try to skip over that stuff and what do I need to do? But actually, if I didn't know how the course worked, I was at a definite disadvantage. And so tried to make the course orientation quiz a mini gatekeeper, not something that would hold students back from being successful, but something that would require them to at least go through the key content. So again, even within the course orientation, where do I want them to start? Right there at the beginning. So if they're opening this, here are just some welcome introductory information, but also in video format too. So maybe you don't want to read a bunch of text, but you're willing to watch the video, or maybe you don't want to watch the video and you want to read the text, but there are just a few different modalities for students to kind of watch me navigate, see how I click on things, otherwise support them. And I always try to tell them it's about this many minutes long. So if you don't want to watch, you don't need to, but if you do want to watch, here's how long you can expect. So just kind of that introductory information. And then of course, they need their syllabus. They need to know what their SLOs are. Here is their tentative course schedule. And so I have a PDF version that I've presented in case it's something that they want to print out and have on hand and not have to navigate to. But, or I also have it set in this chart, which is also accessible according to Canvas's standards and accessibility standards. So it just kind of, whichever way they want to access the information, they can access it. And one other thing I just like to point out, this is something that I try to do to encourage students, is that their work was due, they had a Wednesday deadline and a Saturday deadline over the summer, but then Sunday was a catch-up day. So if they missed an assignment, this or that, I wasn't going to be grading till Monday probably, so they would have an extra day to get themselves caught up. And sometimes just that buffer, I think, at least in the anonymous student feedback survey, many students said that they really appreciated that Sunday catch-up day, because it just gave them the opportunity to see where they were, look at that grading sheet and figure out what they missed and get themselves caught up. So those are a few of the things in that course orientation module. I mentioned that welcome announcement. So again, that welcome announcement, this is the email I send to my students at the beginning of the semester, what they can expect, how much time, a link to the tentative schedule, even where they can start, and my well wishes for a wonderful summer of learning together, right? So just that kind of warmth hopefully captured as well. And then at the bottom, I think I mentioned these icons. So I just gave a key. Here's what these icons mean throughout the semester. If we're in the food and nutrition unit, you'll see this set. If we're in the anatomy and technology unit, you'll see this set. If I want you to participate in a discussion, you'll see that discussion bubble. or submit an assignment, you'll see this file. And then you'll see as we go through, those same icons will be visible throughout the rest of the class. And it just, for our visual learners, just something else to jump out at them and support them. And I'm almost certain I stole that idea from Michael and made it my own. So, we're all learning together. Please steal anything that sounds great to you. If it doesn't sound like it'll work for you, we all also have our own approaches and ways of doing and being. So don't feel like you have to walk away and design a course that looks like this because you have your own strengths. But if you find something that's useful to you, please, by all means, feel free to steal it. Okay, so after the course orientation, a couple of things I'd just like to point out. I have these I think I mentioned the resources module, and within the resources module, I gave for the first one a video overview. How do I work through these resources? What's here? But I won't dig into that too much. Then here are the outcomes for the unit. By the end of this unit, in 2.5 or 3 weeks in a summer class, here's what you should be able to do. And so I think this is good. And I try to point out to our students, this should keep you accountable, and you should feel free to keep me accountable to these things. So if you feel like you're not walking away with these skills, let's meet and talk and figure out how we can get you to this point. And then the self-grading sheet, I think I mentioned. And again, this is set up and it has to be accessible, the charts and so on and so forth. But it tells them, here's the unit, here's how many points it is. It's a little bit of an awkward number of points, but it all works out in the end. So don't be too distracted by that. My unit has a reading component and a writing component because, of course, we know reading and writing are skills that are woven together and kind of inseparable from one another. And so there are certain readings that they are required to participate in. If they, I do give them some bonus points for learning the language of the discipline. So if they're practicing their key terms using that game and so on and so forth, they're learning the language of the discipline, I will award them with some extra points. But then when it comes to the writing component, again, for differentiating the instruction, trying to give students some choice. So if they want, they can write an essay, or if they want, they can design a brochure with a link to a brochure kind of designing website that is free. And regardless, the prompt is the same. They have to answer the same prompt. They have to do ultimately the same things. In an essay, it has to be 3 paragraphs. In a brochure, it has to be beautifully designed and fully answer. But regardless, they have to use evidence from the text. They have to use the key terms. It should be, it should have appropriate college level spelling, punctuation, and grammar, right? And so even then, from the very beginning of the unit, we haven't learned anything in the unit yet, but from the very beginning, they know ultimately at the end of their 2.5 or 3 weeks in this summer session that they're going to have to write a response like this. So then as they're reading, they can be thinking about, what am I going to write at the end, right? And so trying to kind of let them know where they're going, so that they can chart their course and take the journey to arrive there that most matches what their need is. Okay, I think now I want to go through and show you some of the modules, and I'm gonna just jump in the middle because it's fun. And just a couple of things. I think I showed you that introduction and goals page. So again, here's the introduction and goals page. Here's the cornfield in week 3. It's grown a little. I'm hoping that they're growing as well, what they can expect to learn and how they're going to get there. Embedded and indented with this consistent module structure within this week, here are the things that they need to do. So they're needing to read this assignment. When they click this, they can see that there are clear instructions. As they're reading, please do one of these things: create a flow map, take ACE notes, or annotate the text. They know what that is because we're in week 3 by now. So they're preparing, and then I've embedded the PDF document in here, and they know what pages they're supposed to be reading. So they need to scroll to those pages, but the task set for them is clear. And then once they're done reading, what are they going to do? they're going to take a practice exam that goes over that text, right? And it asks questions very similarly to the final unit exam. So they're getting exposed to the Canvas software. They're getting exposed to the way that I ask questions. They can ask me their questions before exam day. They're going to have a kind of final unit discussion. They're going to submit a brainstorm for their writing activity, and they're going to give a little feedback on how they feel their performance was. And then as far as supplemental readings, resources, and practices, there's a chapter on what is good writing, which could and should give them some more information about that Canvas response. And then again, supplemental reading, resources, and practice, again at the bottom. Week 4, you'll see we're starting a new unit with different supplemental reading, resources, and practice. And really the icons too, they're submitting an assignment. Here's a quiz. That's an opportunity to demonstrate your growth. Here are some slides. You might want to review them. Also in every unit or weekly module, sorry, I have this student discussion forum, and I'm going to show you from a different class because I don't want to betray any student privacy here. But basically, oh, that's not the right one. Okay, I'm not going to share that because there are student names that follow below, but ultimately it's just basically it says this is an unmonitored discussion forum. It's meant for you as students to connect, to ask each other questions, to post a response, so on and so forth. So it just gives them another forum that I'm not monitoring, but a way for them to connect. And so there's that intentional and meaningful interaction. At least that's my hope. I think one of the other interactions or things I was wanting to show you, this is my assignment for that jigsaw assignment that I was sharing. So what do I want them to do? The plus sign means it's something that they should be contributing to. So we read a text in our anatomy and technology unit on the skull. It talked about all the bones that form the skull. And so they're having to learn those bones. And I want them to contribute to it. Here are some helpful tips. And if you don't know how to navigate here's how you insert a text box into PowerPoint. So a little tech tip, because it's one of the first times that they're getting exposed to this. And so then they click on this link, and here are their steps. Contribute to the slide based on your last name, follow the directions on the slide, and do that by creating a text box to type your answer and signing your name in the text box so that I can give you credit for your work. And so an example would be describe the key features of the bones listed above, give as much detail as possible for each. So whoever is assigned to this, they're having to tell me everything they know about the parietal and temporal bone in the skull. And that's going to be important later because they're going to be having a discussion or taking kind of a little group quiz on this. And so everybody doing their part helps them to answer those questions. Let's see what else. Okay, I think a couple things I just wanted to show you also within the text box or within the resources. If you look at this food and nutrition text set, which I kind of showed you earlier, but I'll just scroll up a couple things that are important. The key terms in this text box that I want them to learn for the unit, the language of the discipline, I had highlighted them in yellow, but as we know, our colorblind students may not have the ability to just recognize color. And so we put a box around it as another visual cue, right? So that helps to make this PDF document a little bit more accessible to a student. And then as far as lectures or assignments, I wanted to show you one kind of from the beginning of the term where I use something called PlayPosit. And PlayPosit is just a video software. It's a tool that you can add into Canvas. And I'm going to show you a preview. And basically, it's my lecture slides. Oh, that's not that. Sorry. That's how to use PlayPosit. This was my own lecture. Um, and so here's my lesson. And if I started to play this, they would hear my voice and hear some explanation. And then at a certain point, PlayPosit is going to pause and ask them to answer a question. And after they've submitted the answer to their question, then they can go on to the next section. So it does a couple of things. This lesson is a little longer than I'd like. I think it's a little bit over 20 minutes. That's a long time for a student in an async class to sit and listen to a lesson. So first of all, it provides like nice pauses at key points for them to pause and reflect, or to walk away and then gather themselves again and come back and finish the lesson. Second of all, when I go and I monitor or I review their PlayPosit responses, I get a good idea of how well they're understanding. And so I can offer those things, those just-in-time feedback or support, or otherwise answer any questions that they have in themed office hours and things like that. You'll notice if I press play here or in any of the other videos, they also have captions for accessibility and things like that. So anyway, I guess I just feel like it's important for my students to hear my voice in teaching the content, not just a textbook. So I always try to have a lesson in my voice, try to figure out different ways of approaching it. Sometimes I use PlayPosit, sometimes I use just I'll use a YouTube video, or sometimes I just share lecture slides with some of my notes on them, or lecture slides that are delivered in my voice after they're supposed to read a content chapter in the textbook or something. So anyway, I think that that's about what I wanted to show you. It was a little scattered and all over the place, but just trying to share a little bit about how I set it up and how poker helped me to be more intentional. And then really, I would just share, kind of as a concluding word, the reduced cognitive load for my students and the reduced number of questions they've had to ask or things like that since I've set poker up, their ease in navigating the class, their comfort online. I just have noticed a significant difference in the number of emails I get, or phone calls, or requests to Zoom. So for me, it was a most worthwhile exercise because it helped me to up my game. And also it feels like it's really supported my students. And so that was my presentation and my demonstration. So maybe I can pause here and do my best to answer some questions.
Well, thank you, Trisha. Let's give a virtual round of applause. Um, gosh, really, really good stuff, Trisha, and not scattered at all, because all of us we have to dive into these modules and poke around a little bit and explore what we do. So it was really, really helpful to see that in the context of your course. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, we have plenty of time for questions. So what I usually do is I'm going to stop the recording so we can have a little bit more of a loose discussion here. Before I pause the recording, I would be remiss if I didn't also advertise our next two workshops in this series. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for just a moment. Starting on Friday, we are featuring Professor Edward Chen in psychology, doing a similar presentation as what you just saw today. That's this Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. And then next Thursday, we'll have Desiree Montenegro from Communication Studies at 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. doing another showcase. So I hope you all can make it out to at least a couple more of these in the series, but thank you for joining us today. Again, I'm going to pause the recording and jump into some questions.